Hello, year two, and welcome back. Merry Christmas. As you can see behind me, the Great Hall is decorated for the season, and they're going to be celebrating it at Hogwarts in our chapter 12, which is called The Mirror of Erised. And you can see there's lots of snow on the roofs, which means it's very cold there. Now, I am all dressed and ready for Christmas. I've got my Christmas sweater on, which has some night buses, a big time turner, some brooms, and then a hippogriff and prongs, which is a Patronus. You'll read about that in later books. Okay, so I'm actually going to film this chapter in two sections because it is one of the longest ones in the book. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs, so they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver post had to be nursed back to health again by Hagrid before they could fly off. No one could wait for the holidays to start. Well, the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires. The drafty corridors had become icy, and bitter rain rattled the windows in the classroom. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one potion's class, "for all of those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that Slytherin had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he realized that nobody found this funny, because they were also impressed at the way Harry managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come round the week before making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit their son Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out at the bottom and a large puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind the tree. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "No, I'm all right, thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping you'd be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts? I suppose that hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Weasley!" Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. "He was provoked, Professor Snape," said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind a tree. "Malfoy was insulting his family." "Be that as it may, fighting is against the Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful that it isn't more. Move along now, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, "Malfoy and Snape." "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. It looks a treat." So Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. "Ah, Hagrid, the last tree! Put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. It had festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no fewer than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room. Some had sparkling icicles, and some glittered with 100 candles. "How many days left until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione. "And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh, yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them all over the branches of a new tree. "The library?" said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays? Bit keen, are you?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I told you. Drop it. It's nothing to you what that dog is guarding." "We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added. "We must have been through hundreds of books already, and we can't find him anywhere." "Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere before." "I'm saying nothing," Hagrid said flatly. "Well, we'll just have to find out for ourselves then." Hagrid looked disgruntled and hurried off towards the library. They had indeed been searching books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book in the first place. He wasn't in Great Wizards of the 12th Century or Notable Magical Names of Our Time. He was missing, too, from Important Modern Magical Discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library. Tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, and hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list and titles she had decided to search while Ron strode off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there, maybe. Unfortunately, you needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look at any of the restricted books, and he knew he would never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic never taught at Hogwarts and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madame Pince, the librarian, brandished a feathered duster at him. "You better get out then. Go on, get out." Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up some story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madame Pince where they could find Flamel. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside in the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for 2 weeks after all, but as they only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising that they found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madame Pince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went out to lunch. "You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you?" said Hermione, "and send me an owl if you find anything." "And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is," said Ron. "It'd be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," said Hermione. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good of a time to think much about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual. So they were able to get good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour eating anything they could spear on toasting forks, bread, crumpets, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry how to play wizard's chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except that the figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in a battle. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. in his family. In this case, it was his grandfather's. However, the old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well that he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Here is a picture of 2 chess pieces, which are based on a really old chess set that they found buried in the sand at a beach in Scotland. They're called the Lewis chessmen. Harry played with chessmen Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice to him, which was confusing. "Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight?" "Oh, send him. We can afford to lose him." On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early the next morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. "Happy Christmas," said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his dressing gown. "You too," said Harry. "Will you look at this? I've got presents." "What did you expect, turnips?" said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, and scrawled across it was, "To Harry from Hagrid." Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew on it, and it sounded a bit like an owl. A second, very small parcel contained a note. "We received your message and enclosed your Christmas present from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia." Taped to the note was a 50-pence piece. "Well, that's friendly," said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. "Weird," he said. "What a shape. This is money?" "You can keep it," said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. "Hagrid and my aunt and uncle. So, who'd send these?" "I think I know who that one's from," said Ron, going a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. "My mom. I told her you didn't expect any presents and—" "Oh no," he groaned. "She made you a Weasley jumper." Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. "Every year she makes us a jumper," said Ron, unwrapping his own, "and mine's always maroon." "Well, that's really nice of her," said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained sweets, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This left only one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering onto the floor, where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. "Oh, I've heard of those," he said in a hushed voice, dropping a box of Bertie Bott's Every Flavor beans he got from Hermione. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable." "What is it?" Harry picked up the shining silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to touch, like water woven into material. "It's an invisibility cloak," said Ron, a look of awe on his face. "I'm sure it is. Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders and Ron gave a yell. "Oh, it is! Look down!" Harry looked down at his feet, but they had gone. He dashed to the mirror, and sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. "Oh, there's a note," said Ron suddenly. "A note fell out of it." Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy scrawl he had never seen before was the following words: "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you." There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. "I'd give anything for one of these," he said. "Anything." "What's the matter?" "Nothing," said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think of anything else, the dormitory door flung open and Fred and George Weasley bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't really feel like sharing it with anybody else yet. Merry Christmas! Hey, look! Harry's got a Weasley jumper too! Fred and George were wearing blue jumpers, one with a very large F on the front of it in yellow, and the other one with a large yellow G. Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's jumper. She obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why are you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on. They're lovely and warm. I hate maroon, Ron moaned, half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. You haven't got a letter on yours, George observed. I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We really know that we're George and Fred. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapprovingly. He had clearly come halfway through, unwrapping his presents too. He carried a lumpy jumper on his arm, which Fred seized. P for prefect! Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly as the twins forced the jumper over his head, knocking his glasses askew. And you're not sitting with the prefects today either, said George. Christmas time is for family. They frog-marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his sides with the jumper. Harry had never in all of his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of fat sausages, tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, with stacks of Wizard's crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic crackers were like nothing the feeble muggle ones the Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats. Do you guys remember making crackers for Christmas? Ours sound a bit better than these ones, though, don't they? Harry pulled a Wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just went bang, it went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them all in a cloud of blue smoke, while from the inside exploded a real admiral's hat and several live white mice. Up on the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed wizard's hat for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his teeth on a silver sickle embedded into his slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed with her hat lopsided. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a grow-your-own warts kit, and his own new wizard's chess set, a few more pieces of which you can see in these pictures. Very cool. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up as Mrs. Norris's Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy half afternoon with a furious snowball fight in the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried to help him so much. After a tea of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everybody felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed except for sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over the Gryffindor Tower because they had stolen his prefect badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever, yet something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he free to think about it. The invisibility cloak. And whoever had sent it to him. Ron, full of turkey and cake and with nothing mysterious bothering him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains of his four-poster bed. Harry leant over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's. It had really been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk and lighter than air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it, now. All right, I'm going to pause the story there. The next part of it is very exciting. So make sure you watch the next video as well for the second half of chapter 12. Bye!